Welcome to the Eurostep Brit podcast.
Under 10 seconds. Game's going to be decided here. Harrell spots up. Doesn't go. Put back is good! Roberto Gallina with a second chance opportunity. Aris Lee. Per Gunther for three. Got it. Per Gunther, 3 punta. Holland. Pull up three, no good. Orcus, the offensive board. He turns around and shoots. Got it at the buzzer!
Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of the Eurostep Brit podcast. We'll call this one NBA Europe. I've got questions. Why that title? Well, because right now the project is giving us too many questions and not enough answers. While I can't provide those answers, hopefully I can give you a few things to think about so you can make up your own mind, or at least try to find out the answers. I've jotted down some random topics on a notepad, along with a few barely legible scribbles next to them. So, here goes. NBA Europe, the idea that just won't die. Okay, that might sound a little dramatic, but hey, you got to try and grab the attention of the listener. If you've been around basketball as long as I have, you're probably tired or maybe weary by now of the NBA Europe is coming stories. I certainly feel weary about it. I love the NBA, I really do. It helped me fall in love with the sport of basketball, and I've been fortunate enough to cover games as both a journalist and for a brief magical spell as a play-by-play commentator. If you're a newer fan of the NBA, you'd probably think NBA Europe is a relatively recent idea. It's anything but. When the idea was first floated many years ago by the late David Stern, it originally was going to be a division of the NBA based in Europe. Not a separate league, but part of the NBA. I can remember my opinion of it at the time. Even if London had got a competitive team, I still would have nailed my colours to the mast of the Boston Celtics. That's the team that I supported when I got into the NBA, and I was adamant I would not swap supporting them for a London team. No way. I would have gone to any Celtic games in London, that's a given, and perhaps a few of the other big ones, but regularly, no. Besides, I was never convinced it would ever happen. And you want to ask why? Well, because I think people realised the travel would have made it unworkable with long road trips and lengthy homestands. And you'd go from not seeing your local team for at least a couple of weeks to probably seeing them too many times in the next couple of weeks. Don't get me started on the time difference issues for fans on both sides of the Atlantic or the ticket cost. London is, and always has been, an expensive city. Over the years, the idea of an NBA Europe has been watered down to what we have now. A standalone European league, although some outlets are to be believed, there could be an opportunity for some NBA Europe teams to play in the NBA Cup and perhaps one day the playoffs. Anyhow, over the last couple of decades, the idea has gone from potentially seeing the best the NBA has to offer, coming to your home city on a regular basis, to what? Former NBA bench players, G League players, and journeymen? Well, we've already got leagues featuring them, thanks. When the NBA attach their name to a project, you want to see the best, and I can't see any of their stars swapping the US for Europe while in their prime. Can you? Right, next topic. The British question, and could the UK be a spanner in the works? Part 1. Ever since the NBA Europe project was resurrected, 2 UK cities have been linked with it, London and Manchester. London has always welcomed the NBA and seen its fair share of games in the capital. Originally at Wembley Arena, do you remember them? But now always at the O2 Arena. Despite what feels like extortionate ticket prices at times, the games sell out because a lot of people consider it worthwhile due to the scarcity and the teams and stars involved. The same can't be said for Manchester. Granted, it was a pre-season game, but when the NBA came to Manchester in 2013, it was Kevin Durant, Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Philadelphia 76ers at the Manchester Arena. There were a lot of empty seats that night. And this was a Thunder team a year removed from an NBA Finals appearance. The official crowd that night was around 13,500, I think. But I remember there were sections of the arena on the upper deck behind both baskets that were curtained off and empty seats scattered around the lower bowl. I worked that game, and one bit of feedback I'll never forget from friends I met up with in Manchester but who didn't go to the game, telling me they weren't paying London prices in Manchester. Of course, Manchester is due to host an NBA game in 2027. This time, a regular season game, and this one will be at the Co-op Live. That's, over 20,000 seats to fill? Maybe it's just me, but I feel this game will be a key moment in the NBA Europe project. The NBA need to make sure they get the pricing right. And while we're on the topic of Manchester, just which football team are the NBA trying to attract? For so long it's been touted as Manchester City. After all, the Co-op Live Arena is connected to them. But in recent weeks, Manchester United's name has been bandied about. Which brings us to two questions. Has someone got their wires crossed and mixed up United with City? Or are the NBA playing City and United against each other to see who commits? Again, like I said at the top, I don't know. But with United's situation and also their focus on building a new stadium for the football team, I just can't see it in their case. Can you? And this brings me on to part 2 of the UK spanner in the works question. How pivotal could the SL be to the new NBA project getting off the ground? The British Basketball Federation is no more, which hopefully means the end of British basketball's civil war. These new London and Manchester franchises will need a domestic league to play in. That's something we know for definite, as the NBA have insisted on it. We all assumed it would be as part of the new GBBL, awarded by the now defunct British Basketball Federation. But after the resignation of their only director, will the GBBL, or even a similar league, even be a thing now? Especially as the licence was awarded by a governing body that no longer exists. It looks unlikely. So, where would a London and Manchester team play? And that brings me to my next point. Super League Basketball, as a lot of people know, already has teams in those locations. So, what does the NBA do? Do they lure in those two teams to the fold? Or will the SLB be forced to accept 2 new franchises in locations where they already have teams? Let's look at the first option of luring London, Lions and Manchester into the fold. As both teams stand, they would need a lot of investment in order to compete in such a European league. Does that then mean the current owners selling their franchises to investors with money to burn? And if that happens, what happens to those franchises if the NBA Europe project fails? And as for the second option, how would big money new teams in London and Manchester not only affect the existing franchises there, but the SLB as a whole? Could it destabilise it? The impression I get from conversations with people is that 2 NBA Europe franchises in the Super League could give it a chance to grow and finally become, a serious sport in the UK, or it could potentially wreck the league, and not just from a competitive purpose. The biggest thing I can take from the aforementioned is that people are still wary after the 777 era, and you have to wonder, if no alternative league arises and Manchester Basketball and London Lions are not bought by investors, would the SLB even want to accept 2 new franchises whose budgets would go way beyond the current limits? Food for thought. Okay, a random theoretical one next. But just for the sake of discussion, what happens if the project goes ahead but fails? The sort of question you really don't want to think about because it would affect everyone in basketball, not just those involved in the project. Let's look at, say, the EuroLeague angle. The biggest threat to NBA Europe, and potentially the most affected by it, is surely EuroLeague. Depending on which reports you read, the NBA have approached a number of existing EuroLeague teams to ditch EuroLeague for their project, from Asbel to Fenerbahce, from Barcelona to Real Madrid, and so on. So let's just say one or some quit EuroLeague and join NBA Europe, but the project fails. And just say, throughout it all, the EuroLeague has continued. Some questions for you to ponder. Put yourselves in the shoes of the EuroLeague board. Would you allow those teams who quit to return? Would you say thanks, but no thanks? Or would you make them earn their way back into EuroLeague through, say, the Eurocup? Assuming that still exists. Again, food for thought. Now, let's turn attention to the NBA itself. If the new NBA EuroLeague struggles, how long would they persevere with it? One thing I think most of us can agree on is that if the project is a failure, the NBA as a brand will be affected, especially if it damages the European game and takes down historic teams as a result. Would Adam Silver's job be under threat? The NBA have a lot to lose here, and not just financially. It's why, if they go ahead, it needs to be a perfect plan, and not something that has people making comparisons to the failed NFL Europe. And if you don't know what NFL Europe was, I suggest you go look it up. It's a worthwhile read. Right, next topic, the football angle, or for my US-based listeners, soccer. While it's never been really successful in the UK, the sporting club model has been more successful in mainland Europe. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Panathinaikos, Olympiacos, Fenerbahce, the list goes on. Multi-sport clubs and those with both football and basketball sections. But in their cases, it's been over many decades. Whereas here in the UK, it's been at most a few years at a time. Manchester United, Everton, both tried, both failed. It's before my time, but I think even Portsmouth had a basketball team in the late 80s, which was owned by the football club. I'm sure I'll be corrected on that one if I'm wrong. I remember Portsmouth going back out of business back in the late 80s as well. Anyhow, I digress. The problem with football when it comes to getting bums on seats is it's very tribal. I know Liverpool fans who are into basketball but refuse to go and watch the Everton Tigers because of the affiliation. And I know Celtic fans wanted nothing to do with the Glasgow Rangers basketball team. It might be a different sport, but loyalties run deep. And just say Manchester City start a franchise. Can you see Manchester United fans wanting to support the City team? Or vice versa? Would Inter Milan fans be seen at an AC Milan game? And another topic. One of the key challenges for any NBA Europe would be scheduling. With teams still playing in their domestic leagues, games will have to be played during the week. Therefore, do they go Thursday, Friday and take on EuroLeague directly, or do they opt for early in the week, and in the case of the football-linked franchises, risk fixture clashes that could affect attendances? After all, one of the things about linking with a major football team is trying to bring some of that fan base over. But if you're a fan and have a clash, you're going to be watching the sport you prefer, aren't you? Right. We're getting through the list, not much more to go, I promise. Okay. Next up, entertainment and the game. If you've experienced both NBA and European basketball, you know the game day experiences can be completely different. The moment the play stops in an NBA game, it's all about the entertainment. The dancers come out to do routine, or they show a kiss cam, fire t-shirts into the crowd, or even have some competition where a fan can win prizes. No second during stop play goes to waste in the NBA. In Europe it happens, but nowhere near to the same extent. And what I love about some European games I've been to is when a big play has just happened, rather than do something during the timeout, they just get the announcer to hype the crowd further and allow the fans to keep making noise during the stoppage. It's completely different. Now, here's something I want you to think about because it makes me chuckle whenever I think about it, and I want to know if I'm the only one amused by the prospect. Imagine the likes of Zvezda, Partizan, Olympiacos, Panathinaikos, etc. in NBA Europe. Here we have some of those European teams where the fans shout and sing as loud as they can throughout the game and who like to make life as uncomfortable for the opposition as possible. Can you imagine those fan bases enjoying the full-on NBA experience? I think that's one question most of us could answer. And finally, the money side of things. As the saying goes, money makes the world go round. And in the case of NBA Europe, you're going to need a lot of it. Media reports have stated a franchise fee could cost anywhere between $500 million and $1 billion US per team. And that's just going to get you a seat at the table. You're going to need a lot more money to run the organisation, of course, recruit your roster. It's no wonder that they are looking at sovereign wealth funds and private equity. It's not so bad if you're an existing team, because obviously you're partway there, but starting the franchise from scratch is going to be very, very expensive. So would existing teams still need to sell a share of their franchise to investors to be able to compete? Can you imagine a historic club having to sell off their team or part of it just to get the investment they need to compete in this? Of course, if everything goes wrong, what happens then? That's a can of worms you really don't want to be opened if the project fails. I mean, if this was the NBA and you were looking to start a franchise in North America, your investment is a pretty safe bet. Just look at some of the more recent NBA franchise sales to see the increase of value. But with Europe, there's no guarantee of success. In fact, given the franchise fees, just how long would it take investors to see any of the returns? Let me say that again. Just how long would it take investors to see any returns on their investment? It just feels to me like even if fans flock to games, a TV deal is in place and sponsors fill the coffers from day one, you're going to need to accept you will be in the red for a long time. And while I think of it, could the stock markets have the final say in whether investors are willing to jump in when push comes to shove? The explosion of AI recently has fueled gains in the stock market. I think they called it the AI bubble. Of course, all bubbles will eventually burst. The most famous one I can remember in my lifetime was the dot-com bubble. Was that around back 2000? Huge investment, tech companies just pouring money in. Some companies have run badly, and of course when businesses began to struggle because the investment money ran out, the bubble burst. A lot of companies went out of business. The stock markets dive-bombed, losing the huge gains they'd made. The only reason I mention this is because I think we're in an AI bubble, and investors have helped stock markets reach record highs this year. Again, stress, I'm no expert. I wouldn't want to be one anyway. The point I want to make is if we do see the AI bubble burst in the near future, I think it would make some investors more wary, especially if a crash loses them a lot of money. And could that damage or potentially even end the project? Right, that just about brings this short episode to an end. I do have television/streaming on my pad here as a topic, but in the end, that's too much of a minefield to dive into. I think I need a whole episode just to talk about that one. And I'm not going to do it. Anyhow, over the coming months, we'll see and hear a lot more about the NBA project. As I said at the beginning, I don't have the answers, only questions. I do think basketball across Europe needs some improvement. No league or organisation is perfect. But is NBA Europe the way forward? I'll leave you to make up your own mind on that one. And finally, if you're enjoying what we do, please make sure to like, subscribe, or even share the pod on your social media. Every little bit of support helps. Until next time, my name's Niall Gray. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Eurostep Brit podcast, a Hoops and Hockey production.